Francis lives on. It's not a tropical storm anymore, but the remnants causing a lot of problems in the middle of the country, more heavy tropical rainfalls. We'll check all of the tropical weather and then update your severe weather potential overnight in the States. But first, your tropical update here on Stormwatch. Let's show you what's going on, and we'll start it off with a look at the Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf of Mexico. And again, we've been dealing with Francis this last week, coming onshore Thursday night in Texas, bringing a foot of rain in some areas, not far from Houston and Galveston. And now what's left of the circulation sitting up just north of Dallas, but the moisture continues to feed up here. We're also watching the Bay of Campeche. The rest of the Caribbean in pretty good shape at this point. Nothing to worry about at this point, but things may change this coming week. Meanwhile, our flood watch is continuing. This is all due to the heavy rainfalls from Francis. Those of you in Louisiana, some of you have had up to 17 inches of rain unofficially in the New Orleans area. More rain in Oklahoma, Kansas City. You've been hit hard today, especially on the south and west side of town. Now, as far as the rainfall goes, you can see it's spinning up all the way from the Gulf back into Louisiana. Look out around Lake Charles. We've had problems, too, along the Sabine River, the Vermilion River. Look out in those areas. There could be some flooding and even some flash flooding possible overnight in these areas where you're getting pounded with heavy rainfall. The circulation of what's left from Francis, you can see a bit of a spin here right along the Red River between Texas and Oklahoma. It's no longer a tropical storm, but as we've seen with tropical systems, it takes several days, if not sometimes almost a week, to kind of rain themselves out. And that's what we've got going tonight. Heavy rainfall, KC, Topeka. If you're driving from Topeka on I-70, it's going to be wet. And then eastbound on I-70 towards Columbia and St. Louis, a wet night. And there will be ponding on the roadways, a lot of standing water, so slow down so you don't hydroplane. Moving into St. Louis, a few showers, and all of this will be heading towards Chicago for the morning rush hour. How much rain falls, how much more rain falls is the key here. Locally, maybe 3 more inches on top of what's already fallen. So again, there is that risk of flooding, especially in these areas in Louisiana where the flood watches continue because of the very wet ground, and it just can't take in any more water. Here's another look. Here you can see the low clouds here spinning in Texas. That's what's left, and that's where the lowest pressure is, but that's bringing the moisture north. Now, the Bay of Campeche bears watching again. We've had Earl, we've had Francis. Could we have another tropical storm? Well, we've got fairly low pressures here in the Bay of Campeche. Nothing organized at this point, but one of our tropical specialists, John Hope, is watching this very closely. And all the computer models seem to hint at something developing in the next, say, 2 to 3 days. So it bears watching. We will certainly keep you updated because we may be dealing with another situation like we had with Earl and Francis, something developing here and then possibly impacting the Gulf Coast. The Caribbean is pretty quiet. The Western Caribbean, some showers and storms, but nothing developing at this point. You can see we have this upper low here sitting off to the east of the Bahamas, and that is helping to flare up the rainfall across the Dominican Republic over towards Puerto Rico. Another tropical wave heading towards the islands. We'll watch this over the next couple of days, but not in a very favorable environment for developing. However, off the coast of Africa, we've seen this develop, but look at this. This one's moving almost due north of all things. Generally, they move off in this direction, off to the west. And we are keeping an eye on this new cluster of showers and thunderstorms heading off the continent, and we'll have a little bit better idea of this in the days to come as it hits the warm waters of the Atlantic. Switching gears to the Pacific, not a whole lot happening now. Javier is kind of wimped out, just a few leftover showers, nothing to be concerned with in this part of the world. However, as we cross the international date line, we've got Stella here. This is Tropical Storm Stella, winds of 55 miles an hour, forecast to become a typhoon, and in the next couple of days head up towards the island of Honshu, and it could have an impact on Tokyo by Wednesday or Thursday. That's a look at the tropics, sponsored by Home Depot. Back at home, severe weather tonight. Well, there may be a few storms here, but again, the big threat for flooding and heavy rains comes from what we just discussed, Francis in the middle of the country. Watch these areas and also across Louisiana for some gusty winds and some heavy rainfalls continuing. Very few severe thunderstorm warnings. It's not a very volatile situation, but one that we'll keep you posted on throughout the night with all the watches and warnings. Next on Weather Center, a recap of all the heavy rain which continues across mid-America. That all comes up following your local forecast. So stay with us.
We'll look at the effects of what's left over from Tropical Storm Francis, plus look back at the effects of Hurricane Gilbert and your forecast just ahead on Weather Center.
This program was It's time for Storm Watch at the Weather Channel. Thanks for being here. I'm Paul Emick. We'll look at action across the contiguous 48, and we'll look at the oceans of the northern hemisphere to talk about a number of areas of intrigue, including a tropical system that may threaten parts of Japan, including Tokyo. Let's have a look first of all at the tropics with our tropical update here on the Weather Channel. Here's the deal. We'll look at the big picture here, if you will, first of all, as we look across big chunks of the Atlantic. A number of areas of interest, one of which is a system that has been causing a lot of problems, a former system of a true tropical nature. It's made a transition, no longer a true tropical system, just a batch of tropical moisture and an area of circulation moving northward. Doing a way too efficient job as it moves northward and dragging lots of moisture on that east side and dampening and, well, actually, just to be honest, soaking most of Missouri and into portions of Iowa. That's where it's heading. That's from a system that was Francis, that ran ashore a number of days ago. That's why we have, still from the result of all the moisture falling, parts of Texas, Louisiana, portion of Arkansas, a bit of Oklahoma, including Tulsa, portions of Kansas and Missouri, including Kansas City Metro. Flood watches. We can see a lot of flooding in here where the rain is moving. It's kind of an effect called training. Think about the trains of cars on a train, if you will, moving along, one right after the other. When you take an area that's got a pretty steady supply of moisture flowing right over it, plus not moving too fast, means where you see the rain, instead of it moving away, getting on, it kind of continues to rain in the same spot. That's an effect called training. And that is exactly the problem we've been dealing with here, because that moisture supply is seemingly never ending. I mean, it will be eventually, but right now, look at that, just pretty steady and moving in. This is not all true tropical moisture, including some areas that have seen maybe 7 inches or greater. We've seen a lot of heavy totals even today in parts of Missouri, but it's not all true tropical moisture. Some of it has been drug in since that time, and so it's not all the remains of Francis. Francis has been doing a good job in dragging in additional moisture to what was left of it. Let's look at a vantage point here indicating the wet weather around Kansas City. Some of the Doppler estimates indicate around the 7-inch range in a number of areas, including in parts of Missouri not too far away, that have fallen recently. Pretty hefty amounts. The rain may seem fairly moderate. You see some of those darker greens. It's just rain at a pretty steady rate. But again, it keeps falling in the same spots, and that is a problem. Little ground clutter popping up there, but St. Louis, we are still seeing more of this, and the potential is great for us to see more, maybe 3 inches more. If you have to get out behind the wheel or you live in a flood-prone area, bear in mind this is a rough situation now in the parts of Missouri, and that moisture is on the move into Iowa. And we'll even see a taste of the storminess moving into Chicagoland, Milwaukee. We have this to think about. Here's a look at what's happening, kind of the Gulf connection, if you will, where a lot of the moisture is still being drug in from. Also looking to the western Gulf of Mexico. That's one area of intrigue. Been watching this for a while. Not out of the question. Something may pop up. Nothing super favorable now, but indication that area of circulation may be trying to develop into the western Gulf. So over the next few days, could we see something classified here? It is a possibility. That's why this area will be monitored with intensity, because it looks like this is a spot that something may happen, although conditions aloft are not favorable right now. Conditions aloft play a huge role in the tropical happenings. You see a lot of convection or storminess across eastern Gulf and even parts of the Caribbean. But the upper level conditions are not proper. You need a big batch of high pressure, a batch of stability aloft, and those stability areas create a good spot where beneath it an area of low pressure can intensify. Problem is you have the trough aloft. That area there helps to kind of rip or shear a system apart, causing a number of problems in development. That's what you need to keep tropical development kind of squashed, and that has been the case even through parts of the Caribbean and the Gulf. Approaching the Leeward Islands now, we do have a bit of a wave moving in, but nothing of great promise there presently, although a pretty sizable wave did kind of kick off from the Cape Verde region. This one appears to be kind of traveling somewhat northward. This area will be monitored, and if it were to even make the turn and move toward the U.S., it would be several days away. Into the Pacific now, what is left of a system called Javier, now kind of falling apart, was being monitored for redevelopment, but again, not in a spot real favorable for that. Tropical storm Stella, something else to really consider right there. We got some problems here. It could be approaching Tokyo. Not out of the question, getting at least very close before curving out to the northeast. The official forecast track has it doing that. Between now and then, it has it possibly intensifying, maybe around 105 miles per hour, about the time that it does arrive at typhoon strength and moving on toward Tokyo. Could be, of course, a big problem. Across the contiguous 48, in addition to wet weather here, we have the potential for more strong storms, including parts of Minnesota, maybe around the Minneapolis area. Some of this rain may continue to move in and affect us here shortly. Coming up, we'll talk more about this and have all the details on Weather Center next.
Francis may not be a tropical storm anymore, but it's still leaving the mark on the Gulf Coast and Midwest. The details plus your back-to-work weather ahead on Weather Center.
Do your nasal allergies make you feel like a prisoner?